Welcome to Wellness Wednesday. It's the fall and we are approaching the holiday season. So I thought today it would be really important, just as a reminder, to start to talk about parental self-care and why it matters to kids. So if you are in the teaching industry or you're in healthcare, you've definitely talked about self-care before as um, someone who is under stress. I'm sure if you are at an executive level, a lot of businesses now talk about self-care. Not all businesses give you the time to do it, and not all of us prioritize it. So I really want to talk about the fact that we need to prioritize self-care, which is, giving ourselves a little bit of love. We spend so much time as parents making sure our kids are okay, our kids are healthy, our kids have what they need. We forget about ourselves. And ultimately, we need to take care of ourselves and be our best selves so that we can be the best parents for our kids. So again, with the holidays approaching, it's going to get even busier. And I really wanted just to remind everybody about that. So first of all, what is self-care? Well, research shows that parents who take time for self-care are emotionally more available and responsive to their children's needs. Other studies suggest that caregivers who practice self-care experience less stress and report better mental health outcomes over time. So, self-care isn't just about indulging in luxuries like going to get a massage or a pedicure or going on an extravagant vacation or getting facials or whatever self-care is to you. It's also not about ignoring your responsibilities. It's about maintaining your own well-being so that you can show up to be your best self for you and your family. It's not selfish. It's about being able, taking care of yourself so you can be a better parent. Taking care of yourself is one of the most important ways to care for your child. When you're mentally and emotionally balanced, you're more likely to respond to your child's needs with patience and empathy. And we see that studies show even greater, not only do we have more empathy for our kids, but we have better emotional regulation. Think about a time when you've had what I talk with my clients about, and sorry about the sawing in the background, that's Bentley doing some self-care, snoozing. Think about a time when you've had a really stressful day and you come home, you didn't give your time any time between being stressed out, getting home, and being a parent. So the next thing you know, you're launched into your kids are in a great mood. They come running up to you. They're excited to show you something, but it's loud and it's kind of chaotic, and you snap on them. The message that sends the kids is, I'm excited to see mom or dad, and I want to show them this thing, and they hate me or they don't care what I have to say. Of course, that's not what you need, right? But that's how they're going to take it. And so getting self-care can prevent times like that. I've been there. I've definitely snapped on my kids before. And the good news is you can recover from it, especially if you do it less and less. And in that moment, you can just apologize to them, quickly recognize, and this is what I've done in the past. Once I learned more about this, right, is I immediately apologize, tell them that wasn't the right response. And that wasn't appropriate. They didn't deserve that. And I'm really sorry. I want to hear about their day, but can you give me 5 or 10 minutes, right? Most of the time, kids will understand that. And if you're in a relationship where you have a stay-at-home parent and caregiver, that caregiver is probably ready to be done caregiving when you get home. So really talk through that and find out a way where maybe you can take 5 or 10 minutes before you become the caregiver and the caregiver gets a break. Some sort of transition period where you're both getting what you need. And so that can be helpful. When you start to do that, what you'll see is your kids see modeled behavior. So what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is that when you start to demonstrate better emotional regulation and have more consistent positive parenting, your kids will start to demonstrate better emotional regulation. So if you don't snap on your kids, or you do and you apologize and then you say, hey, that wasn't appropriate, you didn't deserve that, you know what, mommy had a really stressful day, let's set a timer for 5 minutes. Mommy's going to go decompress, and then you can tell me about your day, or however you want to do it. Right. And if you have a partner, then that partner supporting you to get that break, but you've got to talk about what works for you. So that's a big part of this too. It's not just about taking time and walking away from things in the moment. It's about planning for it, knowing what stresses you out. I talk about energy management all the time in my office. If you know what drains you, then you've got to plan for those times when you know you're going to have one of those draining activities. And that means you've got to do something to fill up your battery before you walk into something, especially into parenting. Because even though we might love parenting, it can be extremely draining. So without self-care, what's going to happen? What happens if we don't take care of ourselves? We already talked about a situation where, you might be modeling bad behavior for your children. They might absorb that. But for you alone, these are all symptoms that happen from lack of self-care. And if continually ignored, the symptoms can get way worse than this. This is just, in the immediate, you haven't been doing much self-care in the last few weeks. If you do this years on end, it's going to result in much more serious issues, like, diseases and things like that. So what do you see in the short term? You'll see fatigue, headaches, irritability. We talked about that one. You'll start to realize that you get sick a lot more frequently. You could develop rashes or have digestive issues in one way or the other. Heart palpitations or muscle spasms, decreased sex drive, muscle tension. And of course, fatigue, right? All of this can happen without self-care. Sounds kind of miserable, huh? And how many of you out there are experiencing some of this? If you are, take a moment and really take a hard look at whether or not you're giving yourself the self-care you need, giving yourself the time to recharge your battery. So parental self-care, we talked about that it has a cascading effect, right? Studies show that parents that are more emotionally regulated foster stronger bonds with their children, and their children also develop better coping strategies. Okay. That means better communication with your kids. When they have tough times, they're going to come to you because they don't feel like they're going to be snapped at. They do feel like they matter, right? Self-care helps parents not only regulate emotion and avoid burnout and be more present for their children, it's going to make you feel happier and healthier. So self-care can be really, really important. And that's why it's important for us to do it for ourselves, not just teach others how to do it, like our kids. More benefits can be around showing your kids when you're stressed and then showing your kids how you deal with that stress. I've talked about this before, about if you happen to argue with someone in front of your kids, work through the argument in front of them. Get through it. Because then your kids learn that arguments happen and that's normal and okay. And they start to see ways that they can have respectful disagreements and not feel like it's the end of the world. Okay. And if it's without yelling, your kids will start to yell less when they are upset or don't know what to say. Children of parents that manage stress through self-care also have higher emotional intelligence. So we hear a lot about social emotional learning in schools. So your child's going to have a better chance or more potential to have better emotional intelligence throughout life because they're going to have better problem solving skills. They're going to pick up on subtleties that other kids don't because the other kids are so stressed, they're shutting down that extra stuff because they can't handle it. So the more you do self-care for yourself and you show your kids how you're building resilience, right, through your self-care practices, things like yoga, going for a jog or a walk, your kids can do that with you. And you can set boundaries around those activities. Like, hey, if you're going to do yoga with me, then I need you to focus on the yoga session, not, chatting the whole time, or not, playing with the cat or the dog while you're on the yoga mat. Like, I need you to do it. If you want to be with me, that's great, but this is what I'm doing, right? So that's kind of a boundary where the child realizes it's not a playtime that they want, it's a playtime that you want. And if they want to participate with you, they've got to do it by your rules. Um, and setting those healthy boundaries is huge for kids. Kids need boundaries. It helps them to feel safe. They know the rules. When they don't know the rules, they're going to test the boundaries all over the place, and they're going to keep testing them because they're not figuring out what they are. But once they know what they are, they'll start testing them a lot less because now they know what feels good. When they stay within these bounds, they don't get in trouble. They don't get yelled at. Mommy and daddy aren't mad. Kids don't press the boundaries because they want to make you mad. They're just trying to figure out where they are. It's kind of like walking through a pitch black room. If you can't see anything, you're going to bump into things. You're going to bump into boundaries until you know where they are. And then you're more careful when you get around them because you don't want to get hurt again. Kids deal with this the same way. Okay, so you probably already have a pretty good list of self-care activities, but did want to go over a few. Of course, the top of the list, regular physical activity and adequate 8 hours of sleep are strongly associated, strongly correlated in studies to lower stress levels for parents. And again, I remind you, this exercise doesn't have to be in a gym by yourself. You can get exercise by coaching your kids' practice and doing the warm up with them, doing yoga with your kids, going on walks or hikes. All of these things work. It doesn't have to be something where you have to be by yourself. Now, granted, if you're an introvert, you want to take that into account and you want to make sure you find alone time. This is where you have to start to understand what brings you energy and what takes it away. I have a activity that I do with my patients that's called the Fill Me Up. And I ask them to write down things that when they finish that activity, they feel energized, or instead of feeling drained, they just feel good. What are those things in your life? And try to put them into a daily routine. It doesn't have to be the same thing every day. You can mix it up. And sometimes it's hard to get to that, fill up exercise. But once you do, I know for me, exercise is one of those things, especially if I'm going to a class or maybe I'm, going to work out with somebody else. It's always hard to get me out the door. And then as soon as I get there, I feel so much better. I had a teammate of mine tell me the other night, she has 2 toddlers and she was running a little late. She got to the game a little bit late. And when she got there, she said, my husband was trying to convince me to stay. And I looked at him and I said, no, these are the 2 hours I get a week where I get silence. I get to do something for me. And she's getting exercise, right? And so she's like, so as hard as it is to leave my kids or to get there, sometimes I always try and make an effort because I always feel better after I leave. And I couldn't have agreed with her more. I was agreeing because I felt the same way. So whatever your self-care activities are, whether it's spending time with certain friends, meditation, yoga, seeking professional help, hobbies, any of the above, sleep and exercise are always in there for everybody. That's just physiologically how we're built. The others, you need to figure out, and that's might be unique to you. So I just talked about those barriers, those like, oh, I really don't feel like going to whatever tonight, even though, it's a self-care activity. Many parents find it really difficult to prioritize self-care, but research shows that even the smallest steps towards self-care can have really big impact on family dynamics. So first, try overcoming the guilt. And your partner, if you have someone that's helping you parent, that can be the first step. And you can also talk to your kids about it. I've had friends in the past that this was part of their value system in their family, so much so that at a point, whenever their father would get grumpy, their kids would tell him to go out and go for a bike ride. They knew that that was his self-care. And so after a time, they started to tell them to get out because they recognized he was irritable. And then he would let go of the guilt because he was guilty about leaving his kids. And his kids were like, no, get out of here. Right. So you can do it that way. You also, by talking to the people around you that you might feel guilty about leaving, you can also do it by doing small little things in small segments. So maybe you don't have a big chunk of time where you can get self-care. I know often throughout my day, sometimes I have an opening where I have a break. I don't have, patients back to back to back, hours after hours. So if I have a break, sometimes I'll run outside and go for a run between patients, or I have some free weights in the house and I'll go and lift a little bit. or put on YouTube to a yoga session and do that, or I'll walk my dog. Any of those things, I try to do that when I have the time. Even if I'm in the office, I often will go outside and walk around, especially if the weather's nice, just to get that reset. So I did just throw out a bunch of practical tips to kind of integrating the self-care into your day. And one of those small steps can be setting 10 to 15 minutes aside a day just for yourself. You can just schedule that in, put it on your Google Calendar or your Apple Calendar, and put a reminder there. So you're reminded like, oh, this is my 10 or 15 minutes. Okay. Even if it means after you drop off your kids at sports practice or a game, that before, while the team's warming up or while you're waiting for them to finish your practice, instead of going right into the chores you have to run around and do, listening to a podcast for 10 minutes, if that recharges you, or walking around the field a few times, whatever it is, right? Give yourself that. Also, practice saying no. Some of us are people pleasers. And when we're people pleasers, we feel like we can never say no until we get so drained that we end up in the hospital or we end up sick or any of those other things I've listed earlier. Practice saying no to the things that you feel less guilty about. Start there, the little ones. And slowly work your way up to things that you know you really need to stop doing. It will feel good. It will feel really awkward at first, especially the bigger, more impactful thing it is. I remember one season I had to back off of coaching. I love coaching my kids' sports, but I had a lot on my plate and I knew coaching was going to add that one extra layer. So full disclosure, I ended up coaching that season. But what happened is I ended up getting a lot of parental support. Other parents stepped up to coach with me, which allowed me a lot more leeway to miss practices or games in order to do the things I had to do. And that was huge. So just remember, there are really practical ways to integrating self-care. And this study published by the Journal of Family Psychology found that mindfulness interventions can significantly reduce stress in parents and overall enhance, the family dynamics. So what does that mean? That means something as simple as right before you all dig into your dinner, you all just stop. Maybe you do a prayer. Maybe you just say what you're grateful for, or maybe you just take a breath. Just doing something that simple and just being mindful or aware of your surroundings can have a huge impact. I often tell people to go outside and just listen for birds. Anywhere, even in cities, you can hear birds. And they are such a good reminder that we are surrounded by all this wonderful nature that is constantly nourishing and providing for us. And it can feel really grounding and help us to feel a lot more safe and calm. That moment of just going outside and listening for birds can be a mindfulness moment for you. And it's something your kids can practice too. So some final thoughts. Some more studies, according to Harvard Center for the Developing Child. I just want to say again, children benefit greatly from when their parents model adaptive stress management techniques. And they foster, when they do that, they foster their children's emotional intelligence development along with their own. So this parental self-care isn't just about you. It's about modeling a really healthy lifestyle for your children. It's about taking care of yourself in a way that you know you'll be able to be your best self in other aspects of life. So, and you're teaching your kid how to do the same thing so they don't end up with extra stress, extra anxiety. So some things just quickly that I wanted to give to you in terms of, I talked about recharging batteries. Here's some other ideas about what you can do to recharge your battery. What are some activities that charge your battery? Here are some ideas. And I want you to take a moment just to think about what are some activities that charge your battery? What helps you feel restored? Some ones that aren't on here exactly that I have heard from people around here are going fishing, hunting, going to the cabin in the woods. Notice a lot of those are about nature. Nature has massive, massive positive impact on our mental health. In the fall right now, it's getting a little chilly, but wow, it's a beautiful time to be outside. There are less insects. Wear layers, go for a long walk. Look at the beautiful leaves changing colors. And you can also do this with your kids, right? Looking at leaves changing colors, looking up the science behind that and explaining it to your kids, which is actually pretty cool. Doing the leaf imprints we used to do when we were kids, any of those things, getting outside and working in your yard. It might be work, but even that can feel recharging in some ways. And one thing I want to differentiate is sometimes there's difference between physical recharging and mental recharging. So you've heard a few examples where people are exercising. That often helps you mentally recharge. When you're physically tired, that's when you do something more mentally stimulating that helps you physically recharge. So you can physically recharge by resting your body, right? So that might be reading a book, texting or talking on the phone, maybe playing a video game. That will maybe allow you to physically recharge. But remember, some of those activities will actually be mentally draining. So you have to be careful there. Basically, resting your physical body will help you physically recharge. Certainly, sleeping is a big physical recharger. Okay. So I want to take a moment to reflect on the small self-care action that you can commit to today. This is your turn to really stop and think. If you have paper and pen with you, I want you to stop and I want you to reflect and I want you to write down the action that you can commit to today. I know I sound like a salesman right now. If you sign up today, truly though, there's got to be something that you can do for 5 minutes a day. 5 minutes. That's less time than you wait for your Dunkin' Donuts in the drive-through line or your coffee from Starbucks. 5 minutes. Then how can you encourage other parents in your circle to do the same thing? And I should take a step back. Step 2, choose that activity to prioritize this week. Find a place where you really can put that self-care activity into action. Then finally, how can you encourage others to do it? And share that you're going to do that activity. Maybe you can get other parents to do it with you. I know when I am coaching my kids' sports, there are several parents that walk together. They walk around the field. We play at different fields, and sometimes they just have to walk around the same field dozen times. Other times they actually have a path to walk on, but they walk and they chat, or sometimes they walk by themselves. They're getting that self-care time. They have to take their kids to practice anyway. Other parents, create carpools so that you're not having to go to practice every night. So that gives you back maybe an hour of time that you can do something for yourself. And you only have to take the kids to practice once or twice a week instead of every day. So that's how you can work together to make it easier for you and maybe somebody else, which will also keep you more accountable. By working together, you can really create more of a culture of that well-being and self-care that you'll then feel more supported and it'll become easier to do. So remember, you really need to honor and cherish that energy of mind and body. And remember that by giving yourself that recharge, you'll be a better parent. Thanks for listening today. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next time. Have a great night.